You're listening to WCAT Radio, your home for authentic Catholic programming.
Hello, brothers and sisters, seekers after Jesus. The book is Love Letters from Your Father, Epistles of John, Chapter 2. Lectio Divina, continuing the question of Jesus as a sign contradiction. I want to continue what I was saying about the ways of the human cultures. And I want to specifically talk about the church that we belong to. First of all, I want to say that we are not Catholics. We are Christians. The word Catholic actually is an adjective. It means we're the Christians that were from Jesus Christ, that continue to this day, that follow Jesus Christ directly from the apostles. One true, holy, Catholic and Apostolic Church. We're universal. We are the church. That's all the word Catholic should mean. But humans came into our church, and even from the time of John's epistles, and we'll talk about that later, the Nicolaitans, where they followed what I proposed in the previous video. They followed human culture. They were all around the world in different countries, and according to how they related to people around them, they either ignored them, or they were persecuted by them, they reacted to them, they did not see them always as brothers and sisters. Some did, some didn't. And so, the different individual communities of churches in the different cities differ from one from the other. And we have now an element that I'm going to talk about today called the divine church and the human church. The divine church, by that we mean the ones who remained loyal to Jesus Christ and followed his direct example. Jesus not only taught, he also modeled, and he reached out. He converted. He wasn't satisfied. Jesus was not satisfied with the Jews that were just technical Jews who were just worshiping Jews by culture, but did not follow the law of Moses. Pretty clear that Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin that crucified him did not follow the Torah. They gave him not a true trial according to the law of Moses and the Torah. They gave him a fake trial. Not a fake trial, they then imposed that even on Pilate to get him to crucify Jesus, to order the crucifixion. So there's all of these different nuances of how people act. they say they're Catholic. They're Catholic, but they don't follow the teachings of Jesus. That happens constantly. Famous man, great man, powerful man, who will say, I'm a Catholic. But do they follow Jesus? Do they follow the teachings and the doctrines of the church which come from Jesus? Not the things that are political or accidental or circumstantial according to history, but to follow the teachings of Jesus. Do they follow what are sins and what are not sins? Do they follow the dogmas that Jesus taught? The dogma. Did Jesus resurrect or not? Was he ascended to heaven or not? Is there an eternal life? Is there a purgatory? Must we be purified? Whatever is a teaching of Jesus has to be either true, or if you don't follow it, it's false. It isn't the Catholic Church. It isn't the teachings of Jesus. It isn't Christian. And so we come to this point here. The divine church is a church that Jesus established. It's a church that rests on Jesus Christ, that follows him to the letter. What is the other church? There are people who go to church. Are they Christians or not? The fact of belonging to a club, giving yourself a label. So historically, in church history, we call it the human church. St. Paul says Jesus placed his teachings into clay pots. They crack into human beings. These human beings sin. They also have to be forgiven. They also, in their sin, are not Christian. Christian is to follow the way, sin rather, is to follow the way of the devil. So, we go from one to the other. But there are those that have an attitude, almost like a fixed attitude, that is not from Jesus. If you cave in to pride, to thinking and acting that you are above God, that you are then an idolater. Idolaters are not Christians. If you cave in to the way of the world, to worldliness, to secularism, to agnosticism, to atheism, you're not in the church. You are, in fact, what the church and in John's epistles too, and the Gospels, are called antichrists. The ones who are against Christ, like the Sanhedrin and Caiaphas and those Pharisees, were actually anti-Moses when they broke the Torah commandment and crucified Jesus. In the human church that we have today, the elements of the human church are horrendous. Horrendous. we allow the culture to privatize our faith. Who owns the world? Who made the world? Who made us? God. What does privatizing mean? It means we're not allowed to, in His world, express ourselves as Christians, to live a Christian life. In our present culture of our country, we call it freedom of religion. People came to this country because there was, at times, no freedom of religion in their country. We proclaim it, it's marked down, it's part of our Constitution, that we have freedom of religion. Of course, it is not given, and it's not given to us by men, it's given us by God. If you're a child of God, you're free to acknowledge your Father. You are free to acknowledge where you came from. You are free to acknowledge your divine origin. If you don't acknowledge that, you're sinning. The human element, the culture, says, oh, we have to have diversity of opinion. Well, with God, there is no diversity of opinion. It's either true or it's false. You cannot have diversity of opinion against God. Thy will be done on earth. The human element in the church that submits to culture, to the pagan culture. We're not talking about any good part about it. We're talking about the part of it that is satanic, that is atheist, that is agnostic. It's not our way of life. We have a philosophy of life. We have a leader who is a son of God, who tells us that He is the way, the truth, and the life. The way in our life. If we're satisfied to be left out, just so we can say we get along, they don't get along with us. We're in a church then, a human element in the church, which is not Jesus, which is compromising. It compromises Jesus, compromises God. So, in actual fact, we hand over our children and ourselves to schools or training or teaching. They're supposed to represent us for who we are. But they contradict it. And we hand it over and allow them to contradict it. It goes all the way through. So we can say in our culture that if you send someone to average universities, you're giving them their minds in control of people who are atheists, who don't believe in God. Strange enough, some of them claim to be Christian. We give people over to the betrayers of Jesus, to the Judas Christians, which is a contradiction, isn't it? Judas is not Jesus. Betrayal is not Jesus. When I was studying my catechism, it said to know, love, and serve God. As a catechist, that's a thing that I have to teach and have to model where I'm not a catechist. If we allow a pagan culture to rule our lives and determine what we believe in our souls, we are not Christian. We are not part of the divine church. We are Antichrist. I keep using this example of murdering babies because it's the easiest thing to talk about since they're so innocent. They're innocent. They haven't done anything at all. They haven't given the opportunity to even act. Yet they are murdered. And a different opinion. Here we're back to the question of opinions, diversity of opinion. Some say yes, it's okay. Some say there's circumstances that allow you to do it. It's like saying, well, we're like soldiers, we're killing the enemy. That's the enemy. We can't live that way. We do the actions that create, that combine with God's creation to form a human being, but we devour it. We destroy it, cast it aside. It's not important. It's a false love. Today, in our nation, we have to look at realities, not just talk in generalities or say a thing is sad, a thing is criminal. Some people say this is sad, what's happening. It's criminal. It breaks God's law. That's what crime is. Criminal doesn't mean breaking a human law. Sometimes we're not sure if those are even moral. If I break a human law that goes against my conscience, I'm not responsible before God. I don't have to claim it's a sin. So we have to have priorities. Cultural concerns belong to our culture alone. But when there's morality involved in it, it's not our culture. There are things in the culture that don't deal with morality. Just like there's love that is false, love that is true. Values that are false, values that are true. The Bible and the direction we have from Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, from those who wrote the Bible, is that we want to know the truth. Tell me anything in this gospel or this epistle of John that is not true, that contradicts Jesus. Doesn't. So, if we have Jesus reach out, it's got to be positive, and it has to be according to his model. Correcting people who are wrong, as Jesus corrected the Pharisees and the elders, we do have such a thing. We do have leaders, and we do have our consciences. Jesus corrected misinterpretation even of a commandment, the fourth commandment specifically. Thou shalt not have strange gods before me. You cannot put others in place of God. God's law is God's law. We are the defenders, the children of God, who defend our Father. Jesus came when we were going wrong. We go wrong in our culture to bring us back to basics. That's called renewal. He tells us to reach out to people, to our brothers and sisters, and while we are in life, to help them to reach Jesus Christ by our modeling, by our talking, by our concern. That's called evangelization. I note something in observing, just a simple little fact, that I've lived in different dioceses, different separate areas of the church, different bishops or different realities and clergy and churches. It seems to me strange that when I see that they say there are 100 specific churches or communities, they're called communities of God, communities that are Christian, and yet, and there's specific ritual, if they come up for reaching out, there are organizations that reach out, there's programs, and then the specific time in the liturgy, in Easter time, when they're accepted in the church and are baptized or whatever, and we say we have so many converts. When that same church has so many people leading it, the church is bleeding. It's a body bleeding. At times dying. Losing members. And there are efforts. There are good efforts and there are useless efforts. Or no efforts. But to live in an area where, let's say, just as an example, not condemning anything, but just saying reality, 100 churches, and they'll say, wow, last year we had almost 200 converts. There's no listing for how many left those churches that year. You go to some other community churches or no churches, say, oh yeah, I used to be a Catholic. I used to go to church. I don't go anymore. Just a thought. I'll leave any conclusion to yourself. Jesus reached out in the gospel. He reached out to every Jew that he could reach out to, every person of goodwill, and brought them in, restored them. It's a reach out church. It's called a mission, sent out. That area is talked about, it's presented, and who knows what's really happening. Jesus brought back the elders. He made effort to bring them back. He made effort to bring back the Pharisees and the scribes, the Sadducees. He made every effort to correct the misinterpreters. We call them denominations. Back to basics. He was fearless of rejection. To those that are misdirected, confused, we try to unconfuse them. We look around and see our schools closed, one or two still in operation, competing with other schools on areas that are cultural, not religious. When I say schools, I mean of every type. Look out at something positive. The saints. They're all reach out evangelicals. Praying, acting. St. Patrick went to where there were pagans who wanted to kill him, who tried to kill him. His followers, who went all the way to Germany, to Italy, to North Italy, to all different countries. The Isle of Saints, it was called. Evangelicals reaching out, sacrificing themselves. Saints like Francis Xavier, going to Japan and China, India, sacrificing himself entirely. Ignatius, not being able to go, soldier who wrote a book that developed more and more evangelists, witnesses of Jesus. Yes, they were foreign mission catechists. Every one of them felt they were never doing enough. Every one of them. Every one of them was weak in some way in their own life. We can't say that they never sinned, never had doubts. Look at Fatima, the Blessed Virgin Mary, reaching out to people and converting them through children. Every age group reaching out. Children saying the rosary when they were imprisoned and threatened with execution. Yes, we have many good examples. Just like we have correct love and false love, we also have many poor examples. We don't despair in numbering them. And ourselves, we've never not been perfect. We've not been outreaching when we could. We have to admit that. But the church is a sign of contradiction to the cultures, to the human cultures, and if they absorb what the human cultures claim is the way to go, then we're hiding. We're not defensive, we're hiding, we're inactive. some ways, diabolic. As a community, we are the community of God's law and order. That's the time we have in this life. I heard something that was very impressive, where they said, why not go out in the streets again and have processions? Why not go out in the streets and promote life? We have even the opportunity to have peaceful assembly. Simple, peaceful thing. Don't need anybody's permission. The law, even the human law, and the culture allows it. That's an element of the culture that is good. The church has been privatized. They can't even proclaim Christmas. They're allowed to. There's a lot of sloth out there. Put a sign up that Christ and Christmas go together. It's ignored, ridiculed, or substituted by excuse me, a false Jesus called Santa Claus. It's not even St. Nicholas. St. Nicholas didn't upstage Jesus, but Santa Claus does. Santa Claus gives us the wrong attitude even of giving. Take, take, take. Be unhappy that you didn't get what you wanted. Even attack God. I didn't get what I wanted, Lord. I said my prayer, I didn't get what I wanted. I was reading about a saint who, while she was dying of cancer, she refused to pray for curing from God. An actual one. Forget her name. Mary Perez, I think, up for canonization. She said, no, I just say the will of God. I wish to do the will of God. If this is my crucifixion, I die for love of God. It's simple to be a Christian, to follow the way of Jesus, and also hard. But love is outgoing, not just taking. Jesus on the cross said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. I could say, we could say, they don't do anything. Forgive them. They're not doing anything. We live 50 years. Persons live 50 years and have not made a single convert. In fact, people under their care have lost their faith. People are acclaimed take revenge, to retaliate. Not if people really see what they're doing, the evil they're doing, but persons of character. I admire and give the example of St. Padre Pio. You notice how many saints were rejected, even by holy people around them? Mother Teresa, where for years it was declared by persons in the human church who said, ignore her, reject her. She's only an ex-nun who left her convent. And there were others at the same time who in their consciences saw the model of Jesus and backed her up. Which ones did she feel most? Her human nature saw the rejections. Her spiritual nature saw the acceptances, the courageous, the ones who loved as Jesus loved. We really have to pray for each other. For each other. I ask you to pray for me. I've had both in my life. The positives, the negatives. Where I came through, where I didn't. I'm not Jesus. Only Jesus is Jesus. But I want, like the prayer says, I want to be more like Jesus. I want to be more like Jesus. Jesus, help me. Brothers and sisters, I pray for you, pray for me. We're in the same boat. And God bless.
Hello, God's beloved. I'm Annabelle Mosley, author, professor of theology, and host of Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. I invite you to listen in and find inspiration along this sacred journey we're traveling together to make our lives a masterpiece and, with God's grace, become saints. Join me, Annabelle Mosley, for Then Sings My Soul and Destination Sainthood on WCAT Radio. God bless you. Remember, you're never alone. God is always with you.
To a production of WCAT Radio, please join us in our mission of evangelization. And don't forget, love lifts up when knowledge takes flight.